Well, I heard God tell me to do this, and I heard God tell me to do this, and this is the way we're supposed to do it. I got saved in 1969.
Nice.
That it was called the Teleministry department, only it was really telemarketing, but
Yeah.
Gibberish
with the best of them.
Now that I've been in therapy forever and ever, amen. Hey, Aunt Kathy, I need you to be my aunt right now. I need some advice. Aww. And I love that.
Welcome to the Apostate Sisters interview series, where we hold space for those who've walked away from their faith and are living beyond it. Today we're getting to know Kathy. Kathy has already shared her story online in a few places, and she's active in comments. And if you've seen Kathy around, let us know in the comments on this video. We'll hear about how Kathy found herself aligned with the Jesus people, what her 52 years in Christianity was like, and how she got free. If you love these stories of healing after religious indoctrination, consider supporting our work. Channel memberships are now available, or you can find us on Patreon. Now, let's meet Kathy. So welcome, Kathy. You go by Aunt Kathy online. So we are so excited to have you here because you've been in our comments and have been very supportive of the work we've been doing out here online in the atheist space. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, I think I should explain why I'm Aunt Kathy.
Okay.
When I first, actually before I started my journey of coming into my autonomy, my nephew had a YouTube channel. He had become atheist after growing up in the faith, the Christian faith, and I used to listen to his program, and I would call in every once in a while. I was still a believer, but I was questioning a lot of stuff, and I started listening to him and the different people he had on, and then finally, a fun story is I called him and said, let's get together. Let me drive up to where you are, and let's have lunch together. And so I did. We met for, as he calls it, atheist pizza. And we,
I like that Jesus pizza or what?
Yes. He was afraid I was going to, try to bring him back home and all of that stuff. And that wasn't my intention at all. And so I let him know right away. I said, no, I have questions. So we talked for a long time, and he gave me books to read and YouTube shows to listen to and stuff. And after, an hour and a half, maybe, I don't know, we were there for a good while. And he said when he got in his car, he stopped and looked at himself and said, what the hell just happened? That was my Aunt Kathy. And then I went on his show, and then he helped me to have my own program for a while. It's called Vintage Explorer. And I really enjoyed doing it, but I had some health issues. My sister died, and things just got crazy. And so I had to quit, and I've just never gotten back on. But everybody knew me as Aunt Kathy, and still to this day, I'm Aunt Kathy anywhere I go in the atheist world. So it's just kind of, what do you call it, my handle?
Yeah, I think so.
Everybody's auntie now.
Yes, and what's interesting is I do get phone calls or messages. Hey, Aunt Kathy, I need you to be my aunt right now. I need some advice. And I love that. I love it. So
I have to tell you, even from you having that handle, like there's another one. Aunt Jer is out there too. And there might even be another one. But like when y'all show up in our lives or comments and say stuff, I totally feel held by an auntie.
Oh,
I do.
it's like for all of us who were never really that close to our moms, we have
Yeah.
our honorary aunties in this space to talk
Yeah.
to.
And
It's
I am
so
proud.
appreciated. Well,
I
I
am
can't mess
proud.
up my
Here,
makeup, y'all.
here's the tissues.
I know.
Oh,
Thank you, Auntie.
Kathy, can I ask you what your nephew's channel is too?
well,
Oh, yeah.
he is Ozzy. The
Ah.
channel that he had at the time was the Atheist Roundtable, and then it became the Atheist Network Group. He did a lot with Dr. Josh Bowen
Oh
and,
yeah.
several other people. And then he sponsored a conference called Better
Oh.
a few years ago, and that's where I got to meet some great folks.
Mhm.
Seth Andrews and Dr. Josh and
Oh yes.
Apologia, and I mean there were
Cool.
several people there. That was kind of that was my early days of all of this. And then he still has a network, but he's doing more music. And then I think, like, I happened to catch him last night, and he was having a conversational type show.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't know what he's doing. He changes it up once in a while. Hey, that's okay. But he's known as Ozzy, Ozzy,
Okay.
and he does some rap stuff. He
Oh,
loves
neat.
rap music, and um, he, yeah, I
I
never know.
love that it seems like everyone in this space also has that creative side. And so they
Yeah,
kind of do showcase their interests and then they relate to other people on those as well. I'm all
yeah.
about it. Whatever it takes to heal and be seen.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Well, and Kathy, I've seen you all over the place too. You've been interviewed on Stacy's Mom podcast. I did see your interview, and then also you were on Neil the 604 Atheist as well. Is that correct? Tim
Yeah,
Mills of Harmonic Atheist. You were on. You've been everywhere.
I get around. I just kind
Yeah.
of I'm not as well versed and known as SR, but I kind of get around, like
Yeah.
that to different shows, and I watch a lot of YouTube. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I mean I love it keeps me youthful. I love keeping up on what everybody's doing and hearing people's stories and
Yeah.
relating and seeing like what you two remind me of my two daughters, and they're about your
Oh.
age ranges, and
Oh, okay.
they're both deconstructed, and
Oh,
yeah, they did before I did, and so that's an interesting story.
You're not old enough to have daughters in their mid 40s. What are you talking about?
Oh, sweetheart, I love you. I'm older than you think. I have been blessed with a youthful face.
Oh, yes. I think you have.
And I may tell you the real age after we're not on recording anymore.
Not required. Not required.
But I will tell you, my mama's still alive, and she's 92.
Oh,
is
wow. That's
she
great.
a
And
believer? Like
uh,
has she been and still is?
oh yeah, actually, I led my whole family to the Lord. I got saved during the Jesus movement, and
That's what I want to know
yes,
about you.
yes,
Jesus people.
Oh.
I got it in 1969, and
Nice.
that's giving away my age, sort of. But that's okay. I'm not vain much.
You look good. Who cares
I
what the number is? You look great.
really. Hey, so yeah, I grew up in a home that was a very abusive, alcoholic, bad situation. And when I was 14, I was taken out of the home for my protection
Mm.
and placed in foster care. And it was like my fourth or fifth foster home that was a girls' group home that was run by a local church. And part of the rules of the home was you were at the church every time the doors were open.
Always a criteria for
Yes,
safety.
yes. And I liked I liked the group home. It was peaceful,
Mhm.
and it was it was what I needed, you know, so much chaos in my life. I needed something calming. And
Yeah.
so um, I went to church. I didn't have any choice.
Mm.
And it was like my third week there that I heard a young man who was being baptized give his testimony of how, you know, God kept his car from going off the bridge. And that's what drew me. I was sitting in the balcony. I heard John share his story
Mhm.
briefly while he was in the baptismal tank. And I just started crying profusely. And the whole sanctuary just became light. All I could see was light. And I started crying, really like sobbing. So I got up and went downstairs, and my foster father happened to be right at the bottom of the stairwell, asked me if I was okay. And I said, whatever he's got, I want. And we went into the prayer room
Mhm.
and prayed the sinner's prayer, whatever you want to call it. And I got saved that
Mhm.
night in
Did you
November.
feel that you were like feeling or experiencing the Holy Spirit that day? Is that kind of
I
what
felt
you're being
something.
called?
I felt different. It,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
did feel different. It was, I felt accepted.
Mhm.
Oh.
That was the biggest thing. I felt an acceptance.
Oh.
And I wanted to be baptized right away. And
Mhm.
so he pulled an usher aside, and they had already started draining the baptismal tank. So I had to wait till the next week, um, on the Sunday night the next week to be baptized.
Wow. I mean, you were like, talk about on fire, like you ignited.
I did. And then the next week when I was baptized, I mean, my background in religion was I went to a Lutheran school for kindergarten, first and second grade.
Mhm.
And then we moved to another part of town. They didn't have busing. And actually, that's when my dad's drinking started to increase.
Mm.
And so after that, we hardly ever went to church, you know. So all I knew was, you know, Lutherans are pretty structured, you know, a little bit away from Catholicism, but pretty structured.
Mhm.
And so that was all I knew. And this church was a charismatic church. Oh,
Oh.
yeah. So the
Can
morning,
I
yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
just like for a second, I wanted to go back. You said the room filled with light in that moment when you were listening to that testimony.
Right.
I know we kind of moved past that, but like, do you mean literally like you looked around you and like visually, actually visually, the whole room was just extra bright or something? Or like,
It was like I was in a light. All I could see was white light. It was the weirdest thing.
I would really like to know what you think of that experience now.
Now
Yeah.
was probably an overload of serotonin or endorphins or something. You
Yeah,
know,
okay.
it was something firing. I don't know how to explain it.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
I have, I love to study the brain and psychology and stuff.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm not schooled in it, but I'd love to listen
Okay.
to and study what I can. And I've yet to hear what kind of triggering's going on in the brain when that happens.
Right.
I'm sure it's happened to other people in different kinds of circumstances, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
our brain can do so much that we're not aware of. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was like I was in the middle of a light bulb, I guess, you know,
Yeah,
and
okay.
everything around me. I could see nothing but white light.
So interesting.
Wow,
Yeah,
so interesting. Yeah, brains are
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Okay.
It
Yeah, just I
was
just wanted to hone in on that because that idea of like everything was light was like, wait a second, what was going on there? So legit. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. I wish
it
we
So
could
that
figure out if anyone else experienced something similar that same day, like some sort of mass hysteria. I've heard of stories like this before, for sure.
yeah, I've heard of that. You know, around me, even afterwards, I don't think there was anything different. It was just me. It
Yeah.
was just happening to me. But I was at such a needy place in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
Christians
mean,
know that. They have like a radar. They see the vulnerable. They see people that have been let down by humanity.
hmm
And that's their opportunity to jump in and say, "Oh, we have a solution for you,
yeah,
God."
and,
Instead of being, the help that you needed from a human standpoint.
right. And the things that were said, when they say it sounds too good to be true, I mean, it did seem true. It did seem real. And the salvation experience felt real if you go by feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then the next Sunday in the morning service, I heard my first message in tongues. A little
Oh,
old man in the church stood up and gave a message in tongues, and then there was an interpretation.
okay. I've been
And
in those.
I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It didn't confuse me. It it was beautiful. I was like, so that afternoon I went to my grandmother's house for lunch, and I told my grandma about it. Well, grandma was from originally the hills of Tennessee, and she knew all about them Pentecostal churches.
Mm-hmm.
And she just placed her hand on my arm and said, "Sweetie, if that's what God wants you to have, you'll get it. Don't worry about it." And that was it. So
You wanted that. Okay.
I guess I wanted that because that night I had the baptism. And then afterwards, I was down at the front near the altar, and there were a group of the hippie kids who were there, and we were just talking. It was not spiritual, it was we were just talking. The gentleman, the little old gentleman who gave his message in tongues, came over to our group. He laid his hand on my arm, and the next thing I know, I'm on the floor speaking in tongues.
Oh,
Honest, no joke. There were witnesses who saw this happen, and I could not stop speaking in tongues. I was awake all night long. And the next morning, when my foster mom came to, knock on the door, it's time for school, I couldn't stop. And so I didn't know what was going on. I'd
Yeah,
never
yeah.
been there
Your
before.
experience just sounds so like real. You know what I
It was
mean? I feel
very
like you
real.
hear so many of those stories where it's like, well, I kind of figured out I could, gibberish with the best of them, but yours just sounds
these are
so
the caves.
different. Like,
Yeah.
like, wow, like
It
something
was like
really,
rushed over me, I guess. And
yeah.
so my foster dad called the pastor and put me on the phone with him and said, "Kathy, I want you to say praise the Lord in English." And so I did. And he talked to me a little bit that I had control over this and all. And then he said, Gene, my foster dad, is going to come in with you this afternoon, and I'm going to talk to you about what's going on. So I did that. I went into his office, and he said, "By the way, since that experience last night, every one of those young people that were with you have called me and asked, 'What is this?' Because
What?
they'd never experienced it before either, and they were new converts. And so he started a meeting once a week with, there were 7 of us, and it included John, the one who was baptized that night. Um, and yeah, 7 of us. We started meeting with him every week, and he started going through the scriptures with us. This church was probably about 300 people at the time. And after months of meeting together regularly, they taught us. I mean, we started going to Saturday night prayer meeting, and they taught us how to pray. And when you pray at that church, you pray out loud, you don't pray quietly.
Mhm.
Oh, sure, sure. Sounds
You
like what they would do.
you make your request be
Doesn't the
known to
Bible say
God.
that?
Yeah, it says when you say, when Jesus taught on prayer, it was when you say, it's not when you think it in your heart, it's when you say the words. And
Oh,
so we learned to pray out loud. The pastor he had a pretty good control over the group as far as the charismatic stuff wasn't like super crazy. There was order. There had to
okay.
be an interpretation if there was a message in tongues.
Oh, sure.
And
What flavor of Pentecostal was it?
well, he had come out of the Assemblies of God, and it was an
Okay.
independent church. Yeah.
I was once
Yep.
assemblies, so I get it. Yeah. They were very
Yeah.
big on the interpretation happening
Oh,
too.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
Makes
and
sense.
the order. The Jesus movement was taking place in California.
Mhm.
Okay.
That started out
Can you
there.
tell me what years? Maybe
It
that's where you're going.
it started in the late '60s
Okay.
in the Haight Ashbury area of San Francisco.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Is this like associated with what people would call Jesus people?
Oh yes.
The Jesus
Uh-huh.
people
Yeah.
from
That
like the
is
60s,
full
70s.
Yeah.
hippie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
It was actually credits given to one hippie named Lonnie Frisbee, who I don't remember his story of how he got saved, but he got saved and then started sharing it. And there was a coffee house he'd go to, and he shared it there, and people got saved. And they were all the hippies, which
Mhm.
which the hippies are just an they were considered the cool people, the hipsters they used to be called, which
Oh,
became the hippies. And then Lonnie got involved somehow with um, Pastor Chuck Smith of Calvary Chapel Church in Costa Mesa, and that was a small church, but it took off like crazy because his
oh.
wife had an instant burden for the hippies. And before you
Oh.
know it, I mean, there were thousands. They were doing, oh my gosh, they had house church ministries. They
That was
were
massive.
baptisms at the beach. And what was happening was so many of young people were coming from all over the country to
Mhm.
the Haight Ashbury area. And the ones who came out there, I mean, the whole movement was here were young people who were dissatisfied and unhappy at home. They were unhappy with the traditional church. It was boring and irrelevant. They were unhappy in their homes. They were seeing mom and dad go to church during Sundays, and then during the week, they were living totally different lives. So there was a lot of hypocrisy going on. And there was a lot of abuse that was never talked about like it is
Ooh.
today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Child abuse, spousal abuse, all of that was happening back then. So they were seeing the hypocrisy. This was also the time of the Vietnam War. They were being drafted, young people were being drafted. And so a lot of the youth were, you know, just dropping out of sight or running to Canada to
Mhm.
avoid the draft. And
Oh.
then throughout from the mid 60s until the hippie movement lasted till almost the 80s, I mean, there was so much turmoil in the country. There was the assassinations of JFK, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. That happened. Um, there was it was drug, sex, rock and roll.
Yep.
There was the bra burning, the birth control pill. I mean,
Oh,
you
shit.
know,
Right.
so much was happening that the generation of the 50s and then this group of kids that they produced, the world was so different. And they were just seeking for something, for for love and acceptance. And, a lot of them got kicked out of their homes because they were rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to live the status quo. They wanted to be free.
Yeah.
And of course, the music was so different then. I mean, that was the early days of rock and roll, and you know,
Mhm.
um, the Beatles and the
Yeah.
you know,
I
uh,
would have loved that era.
oh
Oh,
man,
But it's
it was
so much
so
fun.
cool. It was so cool. I mean, that was real music. That's my
I'll let you
heart.
say that.
I know.
It still
Um,
is. I'm a huge fan of the 60s and 70s
Yeah.
rock.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Some 80s.
Actually, the Mamas and the Papas is my
yeah,
absolute favorite
yeah.
band of all time.
Same.
Yep.
They
Mhm.
they were something else. So that's what was happening. And these kids they wound up out in California, they get saved, and then it's like, well, I'm going to go back home and
Oh.
share this.
Oh
So
boy.
they're going back across the country, the other direction, and every place they went, there were little revivals.
This
Oh
proselytizing.
no.
And then in 1970, there was a huge revival at Asbury College in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Even the NBC News crews were there. I mean, it shut down the school for weeks. It was crazy. And
What?
then, yeah,
What? A
yeah.
religiosity taking hold?
hmm It
How
was,
bizarre. Like
it was
this flies
20,
in the face of what I have in my head about the hippies.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, everywhere they went, they shared the gospel. And it began to form different groups that their mission was to be as much like the churches in Acts 2:42 to 46. There were communes, nobody did without, they took care of each other, they fed each other. I mean, the whole spiel was happening.
I mean, I'm on board for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that was a negative was that God called them because they heard a voice or somebody laid a hand on them and told them, well, you're called to be a preacher.
Uh,
No schooling. You didn't need to go to school because to them, schooling meant you would be just like the preacher back at mom and dad's church who was dull and boring. And so you wanted to be filled with life and spirit and the word, but the word and the spirit. So the first little bit of a split happened when I don't know if you guys have heard of the name of John Wimber and the Vineyard movement. The,
Vineyard sounds
the
familiar, but I don't know that
Vineyard,
name.
the Wimber was friends with the Chuck Smith from the First Church, Calvary Chapel, and Wimber was more into the Word and the Spirit, and he was very much into the charismatic stuff. And so eventually he starts the Vineyard movement, or it was just a church and it grew to be a movement. And they had their own music and everything. And then Chuck Smith was more of a word preacher, and he didn't let much of the spirit go at his church. He was pretty strict with teaching.
Kathy, there is a church just down the street from me, and it has Vineyard in the name. Could that possibly be affiliated with
Oh
this
yeah, they're still
church?
around. They're still
Okay. I moved to the area a few years back, and I went
Mhm.
looking around like, oh, yes, I'm close to a winery. Yeah.
Oh
It
no, it was a
hurt.
church. Yeah,
That's
there,
disappointing.
Yeah.
there,
Okay.
there's still vineyard churches. There's still churches associated
Mhm.
with Calvary Chapel. Um, So during the time that the 7 of us were meeting with the pastor had contacted Chuck Smith. The church I went to was called Calvary Temple, and he called Calvary Chapel, and was curious about what's going on. And so eventually at one of our meetings, he asked us would we consider doing a coffee house. And so we talked about it. Of course, we prayed about it, and um, eventually we wound up starting a coffee house called the Adam's Apple. It was in
Great.
Fort Wayne. It was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Adam's Apple did last about 10 years. There were different locations that they had to move to. Um,
Uh-huh.
I got to be in on the early groundwork stage of it. We we had someone who knew our pastor who owned a building in the historical district of town and gave us this huge space for $1 a month.
Oh.
And people from the church contributed stuff. We had the funkiest looking place. We had carpet square, patchwork carpet on the floor, and we had the big spools that cable cords on. Some of them we cut in half so you were sitting on the floor, and others, somebody donated chairs. We had a coffee bar and snacks and stuff. And
Got up the coffee bar.
oh, yeah.
Can't pay attention in church without coffee.
Well, back then, there was not, this was the birth time of the contemporary Christian music. There was no contemporary Christian music. And what a lot of the people started doing was just playing music that they liked and adding their words to it, to make it.
Oh.
So out of the Adam's Apple came Petra. Have you ever heard of the band Petra?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Honey
I think
Tree.
I had a cassette tape back in the day.
Yeah. Honey Tree, who wound up having an international singing ministry. She played the guitar and wrote some really beautiful songs. There were a lot of hippies who wound up being preachers. The church wound up having their own Bible school.
It's a weird concept.
And yeah, the church had to build a new location that would seat about 3,000 people.
Oh,
So it went from 300 to 3,000 in a very short period of time. And it was mostly because they were the only church in town that would receive the hippies. I remember one time the pastor saying, if you cannot afford shirt or shoes, please let us know. You're welcome here, but we do ask that you have shirt and shoes on. And
They didn't provide them?
oh yeah.
Okay, so they provided them at least. Okay.
Yeah. And we did all kinds of stuff together as a group. I mean, nobody went without. And we never advertised the coffee house, and we were always busy. It was like hippies were coming in, and not just hippies. We had kids' youth groups come through. One summer they have a big festival every year, and we had, oh gosh, hundreds come through. And we were open every day, every evening. The early days, because there wasn't Christian music, John was the director, and he would allow not contemporary, what's the word I want? Secular groups to come in and play 2 songs, and then he'd get up and share the Bible. And then they could play 2 songs, and then he'd get up and share. And of course, the majority of those groups wound up getting saved, of course. And I mean, it was just a really interesting time. And the thing that I remember the most about it, and what I looked for everywhere I moved after that, was that sense of belonging, having never had a need that didn't get met somehow.
Right.
And of it was
What everyone was looking for.
Jesus loves you. That was the theme of the hippie Jesus movement, is Jesus loves you.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be loved.
Listening to your story, I can't help but feel like you saw something good. Like it was ticking the boxes of what one might hope
Mm-hmm.
an organization of people, whether they call it a religion or not, actually does, which is take care of each other. I mean, it sounds beautiful, and
It
it
was for a
sounds,
while.
yeah. I
And
mean,
people needed it.
it gives me like a little piece of hope of like, oh my gosh, people can do that for each other and behave toward each other that way. Um, but also you don't still follow that. So I know we're gonna get to how that maybe found its fatal flaw or something too.
Yeah.
But this is so strange to me because I just never, I knew about Jesus people. I did some
Mm-hmm.
studying on them, but I just never can believe that. I had a hard time believing it actually happened. Like you think, yeah, hippies and Christianity, like it's an oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
Hippies, I always felt like I just wanted to be free, but it's true. Like everyone wants to be loved, and when all of a sudden Christian churches jump in there and fill that need, and then it's like, but we're associated with this concept, this idea over here, so you kind of have to be on board. Yeah. You start sucking it up like a sponge. So I can see how this worked. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. So, yeah.
The church, the Calvary Temple where I went, lost a lot of their old timey people when he made the decision to let us in.
Okay.
A lot of the staunch old timers left
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want our kind. I say our kind, even though I was living in the foster home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I identified so much with the hippies. If I wasn't under the control of the state as a foster kid, I would have been out on the streets with them, you know?
Okay.
And the majority of the ones in the group were students at the local art college, they were free thinkers and everything. So until they
Oof.
got saved. So,
Why
and
does that make me sad? I had this chance, and
I
then
know.
it was.
And then, yeah. So, I mean, some of the things that started changing that I saw down the road. Well, I left. I got married too damn young, and wound up moving away, and moved like to the East Coast. So from Indiana to the East Coast,
Okay.
and of course, I'm looking for that same kind of feeling in churches wherever I'd go visit, trying to find it. And so I got exposed to lots of different kind of churches. Um, but I followed what was going on back home and followed what was happening in the lives of my friends and stuff. And, over the years, the hippies grew up, or they got so indoctrinated by the ways of their elders that, in the end, they sadly, a lot of them were not hippies anymore. They were,
Is that the hippie yuppie conversion I hear so much about?
they became the three-piece suit guys, and it broke my heart. It's like they lost something and they became different. They still loved God, but then I think it kind of sort of became a little businessy, the business of Christianity instead of the
Yeah.
love. It was very life changing during that time, and
Yeah.
having lived through it and having seen. I mean, I was young, but I can remember what it was like before and after. So, and then
Oh.
the now. We don't go there right now, but
Yeah.
anyway, um, I was watching something on Herbert Armstrong. I remember the Worldwide Church of God stuff.
Oh, you do.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and I remember
Oh boy.
taking a course and using mainly a book called The Kingdom of the Cults. And the reason for the course was to learn about the different cults to the extent that we could go knocking door to door and do the witnessing like they did to us. That was the purpose of this course I took. And um, Worldwide Church was one of those cults.
Holy shit.
Oh.
This was probably in the mid to late 70s.
Wow. See, this has been a big realization for us to recognize that it wasn't just flying under the radar as a church like
Oh,
we
no.
thought. Like people recognized it as a cult, which just like
Mhm.
blows my mind. So that's fascinating to hear you say that.
Yeah,
Well, so you were aware of Gardner Ted Armstrong then, correct? He would
sure.
have been around that time period, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And was he the one who made the changeover?
No. That was Armstrong's son, Herbert W. Armstrong's son,
Okay.
but he was caught with, extramarital affair and all
Oh,
kinds of scandals. And so
oh,
he was
yeah.
just kind of dropped off radar. And then Armstrong, somebody else succeeded him, a man named Joseph Tkach. And he made the changes in 1994. And that's when basically the church just fell apart.
Kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
Okay.
They
'Cause
liked the fundamentalism.
I remember when the change happened as well,
Okay.
Okay.
and kind of being happy. It's like
I know.
they finally saw the light, it's like we don't want anybody going down the tube. So yay, they finally got it.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
I do remember
That's so funny.
because of the radio show it had a lot of
Mhm.
power. And then the what was the magazine that went
The
out?
plate truth.
In truth.
The Plain Truth. Yeah.
And his
Those-
show was
those
called The
follow-
World Tomorrow.
The World Tomorrow. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember that.
That's
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
We
Wow.
just never knew how many survivors were out there and how it
Mhm.
impacted people and how people saw it from the outside, like you. Like, we had no idea. We thought we were just like, yeah, like you said, Pat's under the radar and nobody really knew
Mhm.
about it, but people knew it and they knew it as a cult. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you guys were in a box, and that's the way I felt
Right.
for so many years. As I was in this box of Christianity, or I'd like to say a bird cage. I was trapped inside this bird cage, and there was somebody to feed and water me, but I didn't have the freedom to get out and fly. I could see what was going around a little bit, but I
Mm.
couldn't participate in it
Yeah.
until I found the magic way to open the door and get out and
Right.
fly.
And fly, spread
Good
those
way to
wings and
describe
fly.
So
I think though we were saying that you had moved
I
back or you'd moved to the East
I'd
Coast after
moved to the
getting
East
married.
Coast, yeah,
Yeah.
and that was it wound up being how do I explain? I'm trying to summarize. How do you summarize 52 years
I
into
know,
a
right?
little? Yeah, but that marriage wound up being just like my mom and dad. He was abusive.
Oh.
He started drinking, and it wound up being very bad. So it ended in divorce.
Hmm.
But I had my two daughters. Those were my blessings out of that marriage. But when we uh, split, by that time we were living in Virginia. So we had moved from South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. And we had only been in the Portsmouth, Virginia area a very short period of time. And on the way to a grocery store, this route I took, I kept going by this church and just feeling like, I ought to check that out. Well, I finally took the girls one morning and checked it out, and I liked it. And it was called Berean Chapel. And I started going there, and they were very warm and receptive and helpful. And, well, within a very short period of time is when we separated. And actually, the elders came to pick my girls and I up and move us out.
Oh.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought, wow, they don't hardly know me. And there was somebody from the church that owned a great big house that had 7 bedrooms. And they took the girls and I in for almost a year until I could get on my feet and stuff. And I noticed that some of their teaching was different than what I was used to, but it was still Christian and they still had the charismatic stuff. Well, have you heard of Bill Gothard?
Oh, yeah.
I've heard the name, but I don't know much about him, to be honest.
He
IFTB or something, acronym. Yeah. IFL.
IBLP.
IBLP.
Oh, okay.
IBLP was, yep.
Bill Gothard was another Herbert Armstrong.
Yep.
And this was interesting. The man never married, never had children, but God told him how you're supposed to live your life and run your household, and that it was important that every woman had a covering, a spiritual covering. And so the elders of my church were my covering. And basically I had to, check in with them and
Oh, you needed to be controlled. You needed to have checks
I
on.
needed their advice and counsel on how to live as a single woman with two children.
Oh, geez.
But one of the elders was a vice president at Pat Robertson's ministry at CBN. And I went to work for Pat Robertson.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow. You've really been in it.
Wow. Yeah. And I was in it was called the Teleministry department, only it was really telemarketing. But when I first started, it was a brand new department, and we were set up at long folding tables with chairs and, phones. It weren't rotary phones, they were push button phones. And we would call out to partners to pray with them and, encourage them, and always had a, spiel in there about money. And then it wasn't even a year, the whole department turned electronic. Everything was computerized. They dialed the phone through the computer, and you were linked up to somebody and had headsets to wear, and we had scripts to read, and we were timed on how many minutes we could be on the phone with each person. But they thought Pat had instructed us to call them, especially some of the little old ladies, And they thought, anybody who received mail from CBN thought it was signed by Pat.
For crying out loud.
I moved up in
honor.
I became an administrative assistant in the department, and was just involved in had my fingers in everything there. And my bubble got burst pretty early when I found that, I thought I was going to work in heaven.
Yep.
And my balloons all got burst pretty quick when I saw that people are people wherever you go. And
how many years into your Christian journey is this? Oh, quite a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this the first time you felt like that bursting bubble feeling?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So Christians lived up to the hype for however many years that was.
Well, the Christians I was around, all I saw was the hype. I
Oh,
didn't see the behind
Oh,
the scenes. It was when I got to see CBN and was privy to behind the scenes things and getting to know some of the people in high places that I found, you know, like high position people who went on business trips by themselves, who had girlfriends waiting for them in places they went.
oh,
Of I am not anti-gay. Back then, I was because
sure.
that's what the culture was,
It's fair.
and we had a lot of closet people working there, and I mean, people who said they were one thing at work, but the life after work and on the weekends was totally different. I mean, I saw it all. And it was like, what the what? You know, it's like, what's going on here? Um, yeah. So while I was there, I met my second husband, who was
Okay.
who was a preacher,
Oh,
but he
You
was
were moving on up in the world, weren't you?
yes.
well, I was the king's daughter.
Climbing the Christian ladder.
It was supposed to be that I would be a pastor's wife. So
Honorary
Yep.
title, huh?
he had been a denominational pastor who had a charismatic experience or two,
Hmm.
and he had his master's in divinity, but he came to CBN's college to get a charismatic perspective on things and came to work part time in the department that I worked in. And so, one of the crazy things is things were growing so fast at CBN at the time that the HR department was having a hard time keeping up with some of the paperwork. And I was doing the phone calls to verify references. And I wound up doing his reference checks, which is hysterical now. But anyway, we worked together. We met at a lunch. Let me tell you, at CBN, you were required to go to chapel every day, and every 2 weeks we would have big chapel, which was meeting in the studio with Pat and whoever his co-host was or whoever a guest was, for at least an hour, and then we would have an hour for lunch, and that was always on payday, so we got extra time then. But we would have music and then a sermonette. People
Sermonette.
would share. I call it a sermonette. People would share whatever, And Pat was very much into Israel. Can I say that word?
I know. I don't know how to feel about it, but
I know.
whatever.
We're
Just
not
don't
allowed
say
to
the
say
P
Israel.
word that goes with it, and we're fine,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah.
We as a group would follow and have the Feast of the Tabernacles,
Oh, what?
Rosh Hashanah,
Yep.
Yom Kippur, all of that stuff as the whole group of us would participate in that every year. It was a big deal to him.
Interesting.
So the
Really?
whole, yeah, yeah,
I've never heard outside of our cult talk about the Feast of Tabernacles.
yeah.
But was the group doing that publicly or just internally y'all were celebrating those?
We did that was encouraged more personally, but as a group, we did the Rosh Hashanah and the Yom Kippur.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, we'd have special times of prayer and meeting and all for Day of Atonement and
Mhm.
all that. Yeah, we did that.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, this is the
Mhm.
first time I'm hearing about it too.
Mhm.
I'm kind of trying to make sense of that, why a group like that would be doing those, because those are not things you hear about when you hear about anything mainstream Christian-y.
Well, because he was pretty connected with that land across the ocean.
Oh,
He,
That
okay.
makes sense now.
Okay.
he,
So
had,
it,
he had
okay.
he had a heart for that. He had ministry over there. He had TV over there. He had radio over there. He had what was the um, oh gosh, I've been away too long now. Yay. Um,
I know. Yeah, I forgot stuff. Sweet.
they had
Get rid of it.
a humanitarian work over
Okay.
there too, and so yeah, there was a lot of involvement. But
The
from
piece
the
I'm kind of confused about that country. Like the way I've always heard Christian groups be connected with that country was more around like end times prophecy and trying to like bring about Jesus coming back. Was it about that for CBN?
some of it was that, yeah, some of
Okay.
it was
Okay.
that, and some of it was because they were recognized as God's chosen people. He recognized
Okay.
them as God's chosen,
One
and
of many of
and
God's.
that we were grafted in,
Okay.
and
You
that
know,
that was an honor to be grafted in.
Okay.
of
Instead
course.
of like Armstrong, who was just like, oh no, God just switched it to the white people.
Well, there were so many different theologies going on
Okay.
there because there were so many different people who had their voice.
Yep.
Um, there were those who taught that they called it replacement theology, that when Christ came and those who were grafted in replaced the Jewish people
Oh
as
my
God's chosen
goodness.
because they accepted Christ. And so part of that replacement theology is actually in the roots of some of the what we call the MAGA group now under Trump, because the
Oh,
replacement theology was that in every area of business, every area of the economy, the Christians should rule.
oh, is that the
Here
Seven
we go.
Mountains dominionism
Well,
stuff?
that's another little part of it. I mean, it
Okay.
all it all interconnects.
The
It just
tenants. Yep.
yeah, it just takes a different branch. That's what happened after when the hippies started spreading. And then everybody heard, well, I heard God tell me to do this, and I heard God tell me to do this, and well, this is the way we're supposed to do it. And so there were all these different teachings. There was the shepherding movement. Oh my God, that one reminds me a lot of what you guys were in,
Oh.
because it wound up being five guys, prominent leaders, who started this. It started as a discipleship kind of meeting, and then it got to be where every every little cell group had to have the permission of their shepherd on who to marry, what house to buy, what job to take. Oh yeah, and it turned really bad and really weird. And I
Wow.
and involved in that was deliverance. Oh, that's a whole nother episode I could
No
tell you about
wonder
deliverance.
you love your autonomy so much now, Kathy. You
Oh,
really never
Oh
had it.
shit.
I mean I just look back. That's why it's so hard to summarize
Yeah.
what all kinds of things that I've seen and lived through, participated
Yeah.
in 52 years of Christianity. And I was not a pew sitter kind of person. I
Right.
had to be involved in it. I had to
Mhm.
be part. And a lot of that, now that I've been in therapy forever and ever, amen, is that um, I needed to be accepted. I needed to be a part of things. I needed approval. I need all those things I didn't get as a kid.
Human needs, human
I
needs.
know. We
Yeah.
all need that.
And so I was looking for it anyway. And in my mind as a child, if I just was good enough, Daddy would quit drinking.
Oh,
Oh no,
Yeah.
no.
So if what I associated is if I served God good enough, if I behaved good enough as a Christian, if I was a good enough wife and a good enough mother and a good enough Sunday school teacher, then all these blessings would begin to happen for me. And, I mean, just after a while, you kind of burn out.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
What a burden to bear.
it was a lot. I mean, I didn't realize it until as my kids grew, because I worked full time while my kids, helping my kids and my pastor husband, who also had to work a job because pastoring didn't pay enough to raise. When he and I got married, we wound up unexpectedly getting custody of his 3 sons, and I had my
Oh,
2 daughters. So we were almost a Brady Bunch.
that's a lot. Yeah, yeah.
And the first church that we took was a little old country church in southern Georgia that paid us $50 a week and provided the parsonage.
Okay.
And so here we were with 5 kids living in a single wide trailer.
Oh, that was the parsonage.
Yeah, in the
Okay.
middle of a pine tree forest, 35 miles from the biggest town, serving God and loving his people. And yeah, that's the trip.
So what year are we talking here? Like when was it that you married? And
85.
okay, and you're out in the woods in 85 with your pastor husband. Okay.
Mhm.
This is crazy. Oh my
It's
goodness.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's all connected. It is all connected, and you can see how Christianity has kind of done this since, it came onto
Mhm.
the scene. And you had mentioned Bill Gothard and how similar he is to Armstrong. And I just remembered this, Pats. I believe Bill Gothard Ministries bought out the old property there in I want to say Big Sandy, Texas, that was owned by Worldwide
Oh.
I
Church of
think
God.
you're right. I think you're right.
I knew there was a connection there, and I think
Yeah.
it was Bill Gothard Ministries that now owns it.
Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
fucked. All of it is so fucked. But anyway,
Yeah. I got
yeah.
to go to Bill Gothard seminars and all that.
Yay!
Oh, yeah. Thousands of people who are all dressed alike and women with, you look at the Dugglers, that show, the TV show, you know who the Dugglers are,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
They're under Bill Gothard.
Yep.
Oh, it's a quiverful ministry thing. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what they're involved in.
Who's Shiny Happy People? Is that?
That's them.
That's them too. Oh, okay, got it. Shiny Happy.
The Shiny Happy People is basically one of their daughters telling her story.
Got it.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
And that, if you haven't watched it, you should watch it.
I
Yes,
will.
It's
Okay.
very
I need to.
informative.
we've heard good things. We'll add it to the list of
Yeah, I know. Well, let's say pick a card, any card. What day? What are
I
we going to watch?
more to learn.
That's the way I feel when I
Wow.
turn on YouTube. It's like, okay, which one is it today? What
Right.
am I going to listen to today? And I don't know about you. Maybe you're not there yet. I don't know. I go through spells where I'll listen to stories and stuff. And then it's like, I can't listen to this anymore. And so I
Mhm.
have to take a pause. But then that's when I get into the academic stuff. I
Yeah.
love Dr. Josh, Dr. Kip,
Yeah.
Dan McClellan, all those guys
Yes.
who really know what they're talking about. And I
Mhm.
love it. I love it. So I'll do
Right.
them. for a while, and then it's like, okay, I got to hear some more stories.
I think that's
Right.
kind of how everything works, right? In life, like our interests, like we are really into things for a while and then it kind of fizzles out for a while, but then we might
Yes,
get back to it and then we get
yes.
really into it again and then it fizzles out.
I
I
think
don't
you're
know. I
right,
think everything
Nancy.
works that way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I
Yeah.
think that's healthy.
We started and we did some home churches
Yes.
throughout the years. We assisted in some other churches throughout the years, and we moved quite a bit. Um, my children have finally talked to me about the moving and
Oh,
said, we
how'd that
always
go?
we wondered if God could never make up his mind.
Oh,
Because every time we moved, it was because God was telling us we needed to
Oh,
go here and
jeez.
this. And, and at bottom line, most of the time it wasn't God, it was something else. But, that was
most
just,
of the time.
yeah, well, every time actually. But it, it just, yeah. So we wound up in, I'm in Indiana now. We
Okay.
were in Indiana because I have family here. We were
Mhm.
here. We went back to North Carolina. We came back here. We went to Ohio. And the third time we came back here, I said, that's it, I'm staying here.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's a
there's a
lot of
reason
moving.
we keep coming. Honestly, girls, I wrote down one time in my life from like when I was born to my move into the apartment I'm in now, I have moved 63 times.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
I was in a different school almost every year, a different school every year of high school. Um, and then through my two married, my first husband was military. Of course, that's moving. And then the other one was following God wherever he led. And
Well,
so
and you grew up in the foster care system too, so maybe you just thought this is how life was, just moving around and never finding one stable place.
I have lived in my apartment for 5 years, and that's the longest I have ever lived in one place,
how do
ever.
you like it? What do you think?
It's my security place.
Oh,
Oh, good.
It's
good.
my it's 600 square feet of safety for me, and it's home. My second marriage wound up after 30 years. I left him, and
Okay.
it was
30 years.
30 years of um, emotional abuse,
Oh, honey.
and it
Oh,
was not never physical, but it was a lot of,
Manipulation.
yeah, manipulation and I guess the kindest way to say this, because I'm a kind person, is we lived as brother and sister for 20 years. So,
just processing what you mean. Yep.
yeah, I just came to a point of I was dying inside emotionally. I was in therapy, and I think that's what helped me to make the move out. I had
Good.
had a very serious illness that caused me to have to quit working. And one of my doctors recommended that I go to therapy to just help me transition. For 16 years, I was a business administrator in a dental office. And
Okay.
so I went from that to nothing, like overnight. And it was very, very hard
Yeah.
transition. I made great money and then I had nothing. And my money is kind of what sustained things. So I didn't even think about checking out who this therapist was, who happened to be secular. Good for me at
Yes.
the time. But
Very serendipitous. Yes.
yes, I did not. Um, the first year was just about my working and everything. And then I started feeling safe with her and opening up about my childhood and then the marriages and then the religion and everything. And um, during
when-
this time, I started having a lot of questions. I had questions about the faith and different scriptures that I wasn't getting answers that satisfied me. And so my second ex was a Greek scholar, and I gleaned enough from him to know how to use the tools to, you know, dig, and a little bit of, well, I knew had the tools with the Hebrew too, but I didn't know the language that much. But I knew what to do and how to dig. And so there were different scriptures that kept coming to my mind that I didn't feel comfortable with the way they were being applied.
Okay.
And then I read a couple of books that were, one was by Francis Chan, and another was, I can't remember his name, but they were books written questioning the way the evangelical churches were being run and things that were happening and how they were out of sync with scripture.
Oh.
And these guys were Christians, but they were like, hey, something's not right here. One of them was just at the brink of building a mega church. And he said, God just really halted him and said no. And he wound up going into a home church situation instead.
Oh. Okay.
And because that was dealing with the needs of the people, where a mega church, you don't know who's there, you know, you're not involved in the lives of the people. So
No.
anyway, I felt like if these guys can question, then I'm free to question. And then I had several friends and family members. In 18 months, I lost 5 of the closest people in my life to death. And they were ones who, all but one was a believer. And we had followed the formulas. If you ask in Jesus' name, if you pray in faith, believing, all of the scriptures that tell you what you're supposed to do for healing to happen, and healing didn't happen, but death did. And oh well, death is the ultimate healing. No, that's BS. Um, and it just rocked me. And my divorce, and the final straw was my birth father died, and I
Oh.
he lived in another state, and I was contacted to come settle his estate because
Oh.
I was the oldest living person to him.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
and so
Surprise.
my but during throughout this time, I lost one. I had 4 siblings. I mean 3 siblings. I'm the oldest. There were 4 of us. My middle sister passed 20 years ago, and then when he passed, my brother, my youngest sister, and I teamed up together to go out there. We decided we were all believers. They weren't gonna let me do it alone, which I appreciated. But having to go to his place, having to go through all his paperwork, having to close up his business, having to see, we had been estranged for many, 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 many years, and having to see the truth behind the lies that we had been told about how he lived in this beautiful
Oh.
house. He lived in this beautiful 2-story house out in the woods, and had this successful business, and to find it was a trailer in a dumpy area. And he did have land, but it was because of his fifth wife's family's land. And
Okay.
so we had to go back and forth to Missouri 7 times. It took 3 years to settle everything.
Holy shit.
Shit.
It caused
Jinx.
us to have to relive our childhood.
Oh.
Oh, right.
And I went into a super depression
Oh,
and
yeah.
I had many days that I couldn't get out of bed, and then there were days that I could get up, I could go see my therapist, and come home and go back to bed. It was just, it was a really, really hard time. And that was more of a time of questioning God. Where are you? Why did you let that happen to us?
Mhm.
You know, all of the kinds of questions you can think would happen happened. And I pretty much quit going to church. I quit praying. I quit, and I had been a up in the morning reading the word to myself out loud every day
Ooh.
and praying out loud every day kind of person. And I just cut it all off. And um,
I'm very grateful you had your therapist during all
oh,
this.
she's been my lifesaver.
Yeah.
I just don't know how I would have made it without her. She called, even I had something that kind of upset me 2 weeks ago when I saw her, and she texted me the other day just to see if I was doing okay.
Oh,
And I went from I'd see her sometimes twice a week,
yeah.
you know, and then after the years it was once a month, and then if something happened it'd be back to once a week or twice. I mean, whatever I need,
Yeah.
she's real good about that because I mean
Mm.
we have had a lot of shit to work through, and
Mm-hmm.
and I mean she's just been wonderful. But then after the stuff, I was starting to get myself together, and my nephew um, did the YouTube thing. My baby sister is his
Cool.
mom. She was a worship pastor for many years, and she had lost her hearing in one ear and had to set it aside. You know, she was still active in church, and her other son is a pastor of a church. And so when her oldest son, Oz, left the faith, it was very traumatic to her
Mm.
and to the family, you know. But I found Oz to be the one that I felt safest with to ask the questions because I knew I wouldn't be reprimanded or, you know the stuff. And
Yeah.
then less than 6 months after I made the declaration that I'm not, I had just finished reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I stood up from my bed and I walked through my door and I said, I'm done. That's it.
Ugh,
And
freedom.
yeah, yeah, and it was.
Gilgamesh and the flood
Yeah,
story.
yep. That's what finally did it. And,
Wow.
Ugh.
um, but it was 3 or 4 months after that that my baby sister died.
Oh
And,
no.
and so it was I had my show, my YouTube show, and Oz and I tried to be there for each other, and then I got sick. It was just too much, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And so I
Yeah.
stopped my show, and I just kind of had to take a good couple years to regroup. And, you know, it was my first experience of death without God.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it was a major situation because it was my baby sister, you
Yeah.
know, and she was almost 11 years younger than me. And she was like my baby. I would push her in the stroller and change her diapers and give her baths and stuff because there were times when mom was so mentally checking out because of dad's drinking that, I was mom to these little kids besides, you know. So anyway, it took about 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years for me to finally get. I'd say last summer was when I started like, okay, I'm ready to live again.
Ugh.
And and I fought the lonely. by, being online. But then I told my therapist, I said, I need people to touch. And that's when I did a Google search on free thinkers near me and found, ta-da, there was one just down the street.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and then through that, I found a book club, and we read only the banned books. And so that's cool. And
I love that concept.
my community, Kokomo is not that big of a city. I mean, it's like maybe
Yeah.
32,000. And I really didn't expect to find too many non-believers, but if
Yeah.
we were all together, it would be close to 200 that we know of.
Ah,
But we never know. There could be, like this month, there were 6 people. One time there were 15 or 16, and one time there was 3. It's just whoever could get there whenever.
Right. Well, it's hard
Um,
to find other free thinkers and secular humanists because we don't have
mhm,
churches in these buildings that people
right.
pay tithe money for to congregate in. It's kind of like all Christians are just collected together, and then atheists, we're all on our own, just kind of
Yeah.
spread
Right.
out, and it's more work to find each other.
The sad thing, for some of them, we're sort of in our own kind of Bible belt here,
yeah.
is that they are really afraid for their jobs if it was found out that they weren't believers.
Oh
And
my goodness.
That's so scary.
and these are jobs that are in the community, not just involved in a church, but in a, you know, like, well, I don't want to say, but yeah, people who are involved in things that they're just really afraid that if somebody found out, the
Yeah.
wrong people found out yeah, and that's really sad. I think that's part of why some of them don't want to come out, is that
Yeah.
they're afraid they're going to be seen, and you
Yeah. I
know,
think it was John the Skeptic that we interviewed recently, and he
yeah,
had
so what? Yeah,
a story about losing his job that was related
yeah,
to being an atheist.
is
And
that?
Forrest Velka reached out to him. He's like, "What happened here? You got fired for being an atheist? Tell me about
Mhm,
that." So I'm glad people are paying attention to this. It's not
mhm,
right.
mm-mm. It really,
Wow.
it really pisses me off. I mean, just that we used to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, kind of, sorta.
Long gone are those days.
We've
If that
never,
really
we've
existed.
never had the. I mean, those who've wanted to express themselves have always been considered the rebellious, and like I experienced in the 70s and the 80s and the riot. I don't want violence, but sometimes you've got to do whatever you got to do for your voice to be heard and for somebody to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
that's kind of where we're, I think, at today again,
Wow.
sadly, except in a stronger way. But I won't get political on you.
I know there's places we could go with
Yeah,
that.
really, just enough to deal with religion. So anyway,
I know.
so
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
in April I will be. I don't remember the date, but I remember it was April. I will be 4 years an agnostic atheist, or whatever you want to call me, free.
yeah.
Yeah.
Free.
Yes,
Free.
and feeling free and freer and happier, and the longer I'm in it, the better I feel, and learning and learning and learning, what my autonomy is, and learning about this vast, beautiful, wonderful world that we live in.
Amazing
Let them get rid of
stories.
us, you know. And I
Yeah.
can I can read books that aren't printed by certain publishers. I can read anything I want.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And you jimmied open the cage
the
door.
bird
The
cage.
bird
Yeah,
cage door. Yeah.
no,
Yay.
I'm free.
Was it an owl? I'm wearing owls today.
Are
Oh,
you? Oh,
yay.
yeah.
Kathy, I can't believe you technically like deconstructed only 4 years ago, you said?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, I
Holy
I
shit.
think I look back and see some progression, and I think I've probably been in the process subconsciously longer. But yeah, 4 years since I cut the apron strings, so to speak.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Incredible
What
story.
a story you
And
have.
I've seen so much. I mean, behind the scenes, in the scenes, been involved in deliverance ministries, and I mean, you name it, I've been there.
You were saturated in it.
I was.
I mean,
I really
I
was.
have to tell you now, I know we didn't know you as a Christian, but like your whole, sorry, it's going to sound not agnostic and atheist, but like your whole energy is just so vivacious. And like, it's like I can feel your freedom.
Thank
I
you.
swear to you. Like, oh, it's delicious. It's
Well,
so beautiful to see
Description.
like where you are now and like to feel that freedom that you're just exuding.
and that's my goal. I mean, I don't feel led to do a show, a channel myself. It was getting to be too much for me. I am not technically savvy at all.
A lot of work, understandable.
It is. It really is. And it was getting to be too much for me anyway. And so I don't want to burden myself with that because I know I would cry. That's what I would wind up doing is getting so frustrated that I would start crying. And then it's like, this isn't worth it. But I still feel like I've got something to share to help people.
Oh, yeah.
And that it doesn't matter how long you've been in, there is freedom and joy and release and happiness and purpose on the other side of religion.
Yes.
Atheism isn't ugly, it's a beautiful thing.
Really is.
Beautiful thing.
And experiencing finding out for the first time, it took me the first year just to find out who in the hell is Kathy.
Right.
I mean, when you're always under being told who you are and what you do and how you dress and all this kind of stuff, and suddenly it's like, wow, it's almost overwhelming, but it's so wonderful. And I'm a big promoter of therapy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's true.
And I think a lot of people are pre-programmed in their home life to be sucked in to religion.
There's a statement.
I
Pre-programmed.
Yeah, it's like you're living in this dysfunction, and then you're introduced into it's a different kind of dysfunction, but it's still dysfunction. It's a different kind of abuse, but it's still abuse.
It's much more subtle.
Yeah.
for sure.
And before you know it, you're being battered in a different way. Your mind is being controlled in a different way. You're being told what to do and not to do in a different way, but it feels comfortable because you already know that.
Yeah.
And having to break free from that, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't.
And it helps to talk about it, and it helps to have a therapist. I know there's Secular Therapy Project is a good one.
Yeah.
To get information from, and that they
put the link in the description.
Yes, you just need people to help you walk through it. You really, really do.
And this community. I mean,
community is vital.
Yeah.
Shows like what you girls do, it's just vital because there's such a connection. Even though you were with the Worldwide Church of God, it's still the same tentacles.
Yeah. Well, we were in evangelicalism as well. I was in a mega church. Patty was in Assemblies of God.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our different paths, but it's like the basics are still there.
Yeah.
And something tells me, Kathy, you are welcome in any atheist space on any channel. I mean,
Well,
you're making your rounds, and I hope you're going and talking to people,
well,
get your story out.
Neil invited me back next month.
Oh,
I'm going to
good.
be. He said he's doing a new thing with people who have been on before to see what's happening now a few
Yeah.
years later. And
That's
so
great.
next month I'll be on with Sweet Neil, and
Oh, yay.
I'm just
It's sweet.
I'm just open to sharing and giving hope and loving people and being available to. I'm
Well,
still on Facebook. I
that's
haven't.
okay.
I haven't. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm not good with all that stuff. I don't even know how to post something on Instagram. I've got to have my grandson show me.
totally fine.
That's all right. We'll figure it out
But,
as much as we need to.
I mean, I'm on it, but I don't know how to do things on it. But
Yeah.
I want to be accessible. Messenger.
Yeah.
I'm on Messenger.
Let us know
Okay.
how we can help, Kathy.
Well, I was
Please.
all the things that you talked about, like especially death. Sorry, but that one stood out to me of like, if we end up doing some panel conversations that are topical like that, I would love to have you come join us for some of those heavier topics and like let's just go there together,
Oh, I'd be happy to
Yeah.
help you any way I can, honey.
Oh, it'd be so great to do more
Kathy,
talks with you.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. And can I recommend you, if you haven't already, get a hold of Godless Granny as well?
I did a show with God
You did?
a long time ago.
Okay. I just want
good.
to be a
And
wonderful fit. And yeah, perfect.
We've talked, and actually, she came to the Better conference that Oz did, and we got to spend some time together. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm familiar with her. So
Oh, good.
You already know everyone.
well, kind of, sort of getting around.
Yeah. Oh, good. I love that we're one of your stops on the Aunt Kathy
Yeah.
tour.
I like that. The Aunt Kathy tour.
Yes,
Everyone's
I think you should
auntie.
use that.
I'm just, living life and trying to do good to
You
my
deserve
my fellow humanists.
it. You deserve to live your life now, Kathy. Take
Yeah.
it back. Take it
And
back.
if that's what all of us did, we'd be there.
Yeah.
Right? If we were all like, hey, I don't really know the answers, but I'm going to try to do the best I can for people, like, God damn it, we'd be fucking there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For sure.
So you're doing the right thing, right? Like,
well, thank you. I need
this
that.
is how we change the world, Kathy.
Yeah, it is.
I
One thing at a time, and you would not believe that I used to be a wallflower.
I'm so glad you found your space to bloom.
Oh,
yay.
Thank you.
Yes. The bird flies free.
Yay.
Give me your wings, huh? Give me your wings.
Thank you so much. All right.
So, Kathy, this was wonderful.
I just would encourage people to read, to question, to be open-minded, to be willing to change. Find your freedom. You'll find your freedom.
Wise words. Thank you so much, Aunt Kathy.
Thank you. Mwah. Love you, girls.
Auntie.